I'm about to watch Netflix's Alexander the Great documentary. According to your comment request, it doesn't seem to be great, but let's find out whether it's good or bad together. Okay, so this first scene is at the Temple of Ammon, which is near the border of Egypt and Libya today. Now, this oracle was really significant because this is where Alexander made his pilgrimage, and it was here where he found out he was the son of Zeus. And oh my god, what are those two red flags doing, waving in the wind? I'm afraid that this type of flag won't be invented for another 2000-ish years.
A war is coming. A battle so fierce, so apocalyptic, it will split the world in two.
Okay, I'm going to assume that this is the prophet of Zeus Ammon who works within the oracle. Every ancient account that I've ever read said that this person was a man. Let me Google a quote. So Plutarch wrote, "And some way that's the prophet wishing to show his friendliness to Alexander." It's very clearly a him, so why would you make a him a she? Unless it's for a diversity counter, trying to make this documentary 50-50 female-male. I honestly don't know.
Ripped apart by the ferocious rivalry between two men, Alexander the Great and Darius, king of kings, two bitter enemies, worlds apart, but both sides of the same coin.
Okay, gosh, that coin looks unbelievably dodgy. Clearly, it's some kind of grey metal or maybe even plastic or plasticine. Painted in gold. In real life, it would have been solid gold. Okay, so in that scene, we did see our first shot of Alexander, and all I've got to say is, what did they do to my boy? In my mind, at least, he has one iconic feature, and that's his shoulder-length curly hair with a part in the middle. It's absolutely iconic. But here, it's quite a bit shorter. I suppose it's still plausible, but it would be nice to have his iconic hair. What colour should it be? Well, the famous Pompeii mosaic, which I think you have in your mind, says it's brown, but then again, literary sources say it was blonde, so probably either would do. As for eye colour, in the mosaic, he has brown eyes, and there's no reliable literary sources to dispute that. So they were probably brown, but then again, there were Macedonians and Greeks with blue eyes, so this is, I suppose, plausible. As for skin colour, this has been quite controversial. A lot of people have been saying that they should have cast a traditional looking Mediterranean, but according to literary sources, he did have very pale skin, and we do have to remember that Macedonia wasn't really part of Greece, it was in the northern region, so this casting is absolutely reasonable in my mind. Here we also see our first shot of Darius. He looks oh dear, to be honest. His face and his beard look very good, spot on in fact. However, the costume is rather grim. The red tunic is okay, I suppose, but the scales on his armor, why are they fixed with modern looking pop rivets? They should be smooth, otherwise a sword would easily catch upon it, which would not be good. And why on earth is it grey? It honestly looks more like iron. Clearly it should be bronze because that's what most armor was made during this time. Here we also have a close-up, and it just gets worse. It's very clear that the armor is absolutely filthy and very rusty. I'm sorry, but he was the king of kings. His armor would have been immaculate, polished, colourful, gleaming, immaculate. He's not a barbarian, he is a god king, and his armor should reflect that. Here we also have some shots of the cav. Those horses all have stirrups, which are a rather modern invention, but for filming safety, I suppose, they needed to have that, so that's unavoidable. The Persian army here also looks a bit too uniform. Their army was made of people from dozens of nations.
A young Macedonian prince fighting for his country and for glory, and a Persian king determined to defend the greatest empire on earth, locked in a war of wills. But will reshape the world in fire and in blood. But who will be victorious?
Okay, I don't like this monologue. I don't think it fits in a documentary. Maybe it would have worked better in a film adaptation, simply because there's way too much editorializing, fighting for country. That's clearly modern nationalism creeping into this ancient story.
Alexander just grips the imagination. He is someone who is this shining moment of history.
Alexander was the greatest military mind of all time. And yet at the same time, he was a poet, philosopher, he was a scientist, he was an inventor, and he was a builder of empire.
Those are some very big claims that not even I would make a simple TikToker. The idea that he was the greatest military mind ever, particularly when his army was unbelievably overpowered and was simply handed to him on a silver platter, that does make the claim somewhat questionable. And just because he was taught by Aristotle doesn't mean he was a poet, a philosopher, or he even wanted to be one of those. And a scientist, you'd have a lot of trouble trying to find any historian who would say there were definitely scientists during this time, yet alone claim that that Alexander was one. And also a builder of empire, that's also questionable. Maybe he's a destroyer of empire, definitely a conqueror, but he didn't exactly build one. He also didn't have the time to really build one properly. So those are some lofty claims.
A year before that, he has gone into voluntary exile into a place called Illyria.
A year before he had gone into voluntary exile. That's quite a weird way to say he was running for his life because his father Philip had married a proper Macedonian whose offspring would be more legitimate than him.
And I think what he's trying to do in this place is to find out what's his role in this world.
That is, wow, that's a lot of opinion. I think people should stop trying to force things into being some kind of coming of age teenage flick to sort of appease the modern Netflix demographic. I think that most historians would agree that he simply escaped to an enemy of Macedonia and he was there plotting a way back with his mother. It's standard practice, especially for Macedonian rulers, and when you've been forced out of power by a rival, you seek refuge in your enemy's court and try and use them to get back in, usually using their army. And especially with the scheming Olympias as his mother, this narrative should have been obvious, but no. Also, these costumes are absolutely horrendous. The tunics tucked into the belts, the tunic tops, that's pretty good. I think that's plausible. But the metal pinned fabric on the arms and the leather straps, please, this is just normal Hollywood ancient costuming. Okay, so I know there's a ton of people who are up in arms about Netflix making Alexander gay, but is that warranted? Is that anger warranted?
Same-sex relationships were quite the norm throughout the Greek world. The Greeks did not have a word for homosexuality or to be gay. Just wasn't in their vocabulary whatsoever. There was just being sexual.
I honestly think this is a very reasonable explanation of the Greek approach to homosexuality. In the ancient Greek world, there was simply no such thing as identifying as being gay. Your inner sexual desires and making that part of your identity is modern, and thus they wouldn't even be able to conceptualize such a thing as being gay. In the Greek world, it was your duty or purpose, especially if you're a man of power, to have offspring, and thus Alexander had many wives. Who you slept with recreationally really didn't matter, and it really was just being sexual. Although if you are a powerful man, it's generally a very bad idea to be submissive, as in being penetrated, because that was the feminine role. And we know that this relationship here was very much plausible, so I don't see much of a problem in this scene.
Alexander's year in exile ends in 336 BCE when he receives a royal summons from his dad to attend a royal wedding.
Alexander had fled the Macedonian court a year ago. There was a huge banquet going on in Macedon. In the drunkenness, General Attalus basically insulted Alexander by saying, "You're a bastard, you're not the rightful heir to the throne." His father, instead of saying anything in Alexander's defense, said, "Ooh, you've insulted my best friend," and basically tried to kill Alexander. Alexander left the court, not so much probably that he was in fear of his life, but more because his father had not defended him.
Well, to be honest, that's as good as killing Alexander, or at least giving him a death sentence, knowing how cutthroat the Macedonian court was.
And pray for a son! God!
Philip was murdered by Pausanias, who was a member of his very trusted bodyguard. But we don't know who paid Pausanias to take on this gruesome task.
It's a wonderful Agatha Christie mystery, really. That they see Olympias's hand, the shadow of it at least, behind Philip's assassination.
Okay, so I do think this scene is generally very good, and I do agree that Olympias probably had a big role in the assassination, but this scene could have been so much better, more action-packed, and more authentic to the sources if they had a horse chase scene with Pausanias of Orestes, who had just killed Philip, trying to escape. In one version of the story, he got to his horse, but his horse unfortunately tripped over some vines, leading to his death. I also think it was a missed opportunity to bring up the traditional explanation for Philip's assassination. Pausanias was allegedly a lover of Philip, but then Philip started sleeping with a younger man who was also called Pausanias. The older Pausanias then verbally harassed the younger, which resulted in the younger Pausanias unaliving himself in battle. Young Pausanias had a friend, Attalus, who was furious and decided to sexually assault the older Pausanias, which stripped him of all his honor. And when this grievance was brought upon Philip, Philip decided to side with Attalus. And because he sided with Attalus, Pausanias was very angry and decided to unalive Philip in this scene over here. It's such a juicy story. Who knows if it was real or not, but it's a real shame it wasn't even mentioned. Okay, I think that should be it for the video. Let me know if you want me to continue watching it, but so far I think it's not too bad. It's a lot better than Cleopatra, but let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and thanks for watching.